Welcome to WooEnglish, the channel where we teach the English language through exciting stories. In today's video, we'll be exploring the incredible journeys of Ibn Battûta, one of the greatest travelers in history. Through his adventures, you'll not only discover new words and phrases, but also dive into the rich cultures and places he encountered. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment below, and share your thoughts. Your feedback helps us create even better content for you. Now, let's begin this amazing journey together. Chapter 1. The Dream Begins. Ibn Battûta was born in the beautiful city of Tangier, Morocco, in the year 1304. Tangier was a special place, full of life and color. The streets were always busy with people selling goods, children playing, and travelers sharing stories. But for young Ibn Battûta, this was not enough. He wanted more. He wanted to see the world beyond his city. As a child, Ibn Battûta was always curious. He loved to ask questions. He wanted to know everything. He would sit and listen to the stories of travelers who came from distant lands. These stories filled his mind with dreams of deserts, mountains, and seas far away. He would often imagine himself walking through the golden sands of the Sahara, climbing high mountains, or sailing on the deep blue sea. These dreams grew bigger every day, until he could no longer ignore them. As Ibn Battûta grew older, his desire to travel became stronger. He felt that there was something out there, waiting for him, something that he needed to find. But what was it? He didn't know. All he knew was that he had to go. His heart told him so. By the time he turned 21, Ibn Battûta was ready to leave the comfort of his home, ready to say goodbye to his family and friends, and ready to face the unknown. It was not an easy decision, but he knew it was the right one. He decided that his first journey would be to Mecca, the holy city. Every Muslim dreams of going to Mecca at least once in their life, and Ibn Battûta was no different. But for him, this was not just a religious journey. It was the beginning of something much bigger. On the day he left, Ibn Battûta stood at the gates of Tangier. He looked back at his city, the place where he had grown up, the place that had shaped him. He felt a mixture of emotions: excitement, fear, sadness, and hope. But most of all, he felt ready to take on the world, to see things he had only dreamed about, to meet people from different cultures, and to experience life in all its forms. As he walked away from Tangier, the road ahead seemed endless. The sun was shining brightly, and the sky was clear. He could feel the heat on his skin, but it didn't bother him. His mind was full of thoughts. What would he see? Who would he meet? How would he change? He didn't have the answers, but that was the beauty of it. The unknown was calling him, and he was eager to answer. The journey to Mecca was not easy. It was long and full of challenges. But Ibn Battûta was determined. He traveled through towns and villages, across rivers and mountains. Along the way, he met many people. Some were kind and helpful, while others were not. But each encounter taught him something new. He learned how to navigate difficult paths, how to deal with different kinds of people, and how to stay strong even when things got tough. There were times when he felt lonely, far from home with no one to talk to. But in those moments, he would look up at the stars in the night sky and remind himself why he was on this journey. He was not just traveling to see new places. He was on a quest to discover the world and himself. After many weeks of travel, Ibn Battuta finally saw it. Mecca. The sight of the holy city took his breath away. It was more beautiful than he had ever imagined. The grand mosque, the Kaaba, the pilgrims from all corners of the world, it was a sight to behold. He felt a deep sense of peace and joy in his heart. He had made it. But even as he stood there in this holy place, he knew. This was just the beginning. The journey to Mecca was the first step in what would become an extraordinary life of travel and adventure. Ibn Battuta had no idea how far he would go or how much he would see. But one thing was certain. He would never stop moving, never stop exploring. His dream had just begun, and it would lead him to places he had never imagined. As he stood in Mecca, surrounded by pilgrims from every corner of the world, Ibn Battuta felt a new sense of purpose. He realized that his journey was not just about seeing new places. It was about understanding the world and the people in it. He wanted to learn about different cultures, different ways of life, and different beliefs. He wanted to connect with people, to share their stories, and to bring those stories back to his own land. And so, with a heart full of hope and a mind full of dreams, Ibn Battuta made a promise to himself. He would travel as far as he could, for as long as he could. He would not stop until he had seen everything the world had to offer. And he would do it with an open heart, ready to embrace the unknown, ready to face the challenges, and ready to find the beauty in every place he visited. Ibn Battuta's journey was only beginning, and it would be a journey like no other. A journey that would take him across deserts and mountains, through bustling cities and quiet villages, over oceans and rivers, and into the hearts of people from every walk of life. It was a journey that would change him forever, and leave a legacy that would inspire generations to come. Chapter 2. The Long Road to Mecca. The journey to Mecca. It was everything Ibn Battuta had dreamed of, and more, but it was also much harder than he could have ever imagined. As he left his hometown of Tangier, the excitement in his heart was strong. He was ready for anything. Or so he thought. At first, the road was not too difficult. He walked through small villages, meeting people who were curious about his journey. They asked him where he was going, and when he told them Mecca, they smiled and wished him well. But as he moved farther from home, the landscape began to change. The lush green fields of Morocco were soon behind him, replaced by dry, barren land. The air grew hotter. The sun blazed in the sky, and the wind, oh, the wind. It blew sand into his face, stinging his eyes. The desert stretched out before him, endless and empty. The sand beneath his feet was hot, burning through his sandals. Every step was a struggle, but Ibn Battuta kept going. He was determined to reach Mecca, no matter what. Days turned into weeks as he crossed the vast desert. The journey was lonely at times. He walked for hours without seeing another soul, just the endless dunes rolling like waves in a sea of sand. At night, the desert was cold and quiet. The stars above were his only companions. Sometimes he felt small and alone, but he knew he could not give up. His faith and his dream kept him moving forward. But not everything on the road was quiet and lonely. One day, as he was walking, he saw a group of travelers in the distance. As they came closer, he could see that they were merchants, their camels heavy with goods to sell. They greeted him warmly, and he was happy to have company. They shared their food with him, and in return, he told them stories of Tangier. The merchants told him about the dangers ahead, bandits who hid in the desert, waiting to rob travelers. Ibn Battuta listened carefully. He knew he had to be careful, and he thanked the merchants for their advice. The next morning, Ibn Battuta continued his journey alone. The merchants had taken a different path, and he was, once again, by himself in the vast desert. The sun was high in the sky, and the heat was almost unbearable. He wrapped his turban tightly around his head to protect himself from the sun, but still, he could feel the sweat running down his back. His throat was dry, and he took small sips of water from his flask, trying to make it last. As he walked, he kept his eyes open for any sign of danger. The merchant's words about bandits echoed in his mind. He knew he had to be alert. And then, suddenly, he saw them. In the distance, a group of men on horseback riding fast. His heart raced. He knew they were coming for him. Bandits. He had no choice but to run. But where? There was no place to hide, only sand and more sand. The bandits were getting closer, and Ibn Battuta could hear their shouts. He ran as fast as he could, his heart pounding in his chest. The sand slowed him down, and he could feel his legs growing tired. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Then, just as the bandits were almost upon him, he saw a rocky hill in the distance. With all his remaining strength, he ran towards it. He scrambled up the rocks, hoping to find a place to hide. The bandits were close now, but he was faster. He found a small cave in the rocks and squeezed inside, holding his breath as the bandits rode past. They searched for him, but they did not find him. After what felt like hours, they finally gave up and rode away. Ibn Battuta waited until he was sure they were gone before he came out of the cave. His heart was still racing, but he was safe, for now. He knew he had been lucky, but he also knew that he couldn't rely on luck alone. He needed to be more careful, to trust his instincts, and to be brave. The rest of the journey was not any easier. The desert was unforgiving, but Ibn Battuta was determined. He traveled for months, crossing mountains, rivers, and more deserts. He faced many challenges: storms that threatened to blow him off course, wild animals that prowled in the night, and the constant struggle to find food and water. But each time, he found a way to keep going. His dream of reaching Mecca was stronger than any obstacle. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of walking, Ibn Battuta saw it. Mecca. The sight of the city in the distance filled him with a joy he had never known. The tall minarets, the grand mosque, the thousands of people, all there to worship, just like him. His heart swelled with emotion. He had made it. All the struggles, all the challenges, they had brought him here. As he entered the city, he was overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. The streets were full of people from all over the world, speaking different languages, wearing different clothes, but they were all united in their purpose: to visit the holy city of Mecca. Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of peace. He had never seen anything like this before. It was more beautiful than he had ever imagined. He walked to the grand mosque, his heart pounding with excitement. He had waited so long for this moment, and now it was finally here. As he stood before the Kaaba, the most sacred place in Islam, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Tears filled his eyes. This was the moment he had dreamed of. And now, it was real. But as he stood there, surrounded by people from every corner of the world, Ibn Battûta knew that this was just the beginning. His journey to Mecca had been long and difficult, but it had also taught him so much. He'd learned to be strong, to trust himself, and to never give up. And now, as he looked at the city around him, he realized that there was still so much more to see, so much more to learn. The road to Mecca had been long and hard, but it had also opened his eyes to the world. And as he prepared to continue his journey, he knew that he was ready for whatever came next. The adventure was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see where it would take him. Chapter 3: Adventures in Egypt. After Ibn Battûta completed his pilgrimage to Mecca, he could have returned home to Tangier. He had fulfilled his duty after all. But there was something deep inside him, a voice that whispered, "Keep going. Don't stop now." His heart was filled with the desire to see more, to experience more. So he decided to continue his journey, and his next destination was Egypt, a land of ancient wonders, rich history, and vibrant life. The journey to Egypt was long, but Ibn Battûta was excited. He had heard many stories about Egypt, the pyramids that touched the sky, the mighty Nile River that brought life to the desert, and the bustling city of Cairo, where traders from all over the world gathered. The thought of seeing these wonders with his own eyes made his heart race with excitement. When Ibn Battûta finally arrived in Egypt, he was not disappointed. As he stood before the great pyramids of Giza, he was in awe. The pyramids were massive, towering over him like mountains made of stone. He could hardly believe that people had built them so long ago, and that they still stood strong and proud. The sight filled him with wonder. How had they done it? What secrets did these ancient stones hold? But Egypt was not just about ancient monuments. It was a land of contrasts, where the old met the new, where history blended with the present. Ibn Battûta's journey took him to the great city of Cairo, the heart of Egypt. Cairo was like nothing he had ever seen before. The city was alive with energy. The streets were full of people, merchants selling their goods, travelers from distant lands, and locals going about their daily lives. The market in Cairo was a feast for the senses. Ibn Battûta wandered through the narrow streets, surrounded by the sounds of haggling merchants, the smell of spices, and the sight of colorful fabrics hanging from every stall. He saw traders selling silk from China, spices from India, and gold from Africa. The market was a place where the world seemed to come together, and Ibn Battûta couldn't get enough of it. As he explored Cairo, Ibn Battûta also visited the grand mosques and schools, where scholars taught students from all over the Islamic world. He was amazed by the knowledge and wisdom that flowed through these places. He listened to the teachings of scholars, learning about history, science, and religion. Egypt was not just a land of physical wonders. It was a land of knowledge and learning, and Ibn Battûta soaked in every lesson like a sponge. But not everything in Egypt was easy. One day, as Ibn Battûta was sailing on the Nile River, a sudden storm appeared. The sky turned dark, and the wind began to howl. The calm waters of the Nile quickly became rough, and the boat he was on started to rock dangerously. Ibn Battuta's heart pounded in his chest as the boat was tossed from side to side. The river that had seemed so peaceful moments before was now a wild force of nature. The storm raged on, and the boat creaked and groaned under the pressure. Ibn Battuta held on tightly, praying for safety. The waves crashed against the sides of the boat, and water splashed over the edges. He could see the fear in the eyes of the other passengers. They were all at the mercy of the Nile. Would they survive, or would the river claim them? But Ibn Battuta's prayers were answered. Just when it seemed that the boat might capsize, the storm began to calm. The wind slowed, and the waves became gentler. The dark clouds started to drift away, and the sun broke through once again. The Nile, once so fierce, returned to its calm and steady flow. Ibn Battuta let out a deep breath, filled with relief. He had survived the storm, but the experience had shaken him. It was a reminder that even in a land as rich and beautiful as Egypt, nature could be both a friend and a foe. The Nile, which brought life to the desert, could also bring danger. Despite the challenges, Ibn Battuta continued to explore Egypt. He traveled to the ancient city of Alexandria, where he saw the great lighthouse, one of the wonders of the ancient world. Though it had been damaged by earthquakes, the lighthouse still stood tall, a symbol of the city's rich history. Ibn Battuta marveled at the stories of Alexander the Great, who had founded the city, and the many scholars and scientists who had lived there. As he traveled through Egypt, Ibn Battuta met people from all walks of life. He spoke with farmers who worked the fertile land along the Nile, with merchants who traveled the trade routes, and with scholars who dedicated their lives to learning. Each person he met had a story to tell, and Ibn Battuta listened carefully, absorbing their tales and their wisdom. Egypt taught Ibn Battuta many things. He learned about the power of history, the importance of knowledge, and the strength of the human spirit. He also learned that the world was full of wonders, both natural and man-made, and that every place had its own unique beauty. But most of all, Egypt taught him that his journey was far from over. There was still so much more to see, so much more to learn. Ibn Battuta's heart was full of gratitude for the experiences he had in Egypt, but it also burned with a desire to keep going, to see what lay beyond the horizon. And so, after many months in Egypt, Ibn Battuta prepared to continue his journey. He had seen the pyramids, sailed the Nile, and walked the streets of Cairo. But now, it was time to move on. There were other lands, other people, other adventures waiting for him, and Ibn Battuta was ready. With a final look at the land that had taught him so much, Ibn Battuta set out once again, his heart filled with excitement and anticipation. The road ahead was long, but he knew that every step would bring him closer to new discoveries, new challenges, and new stories to tell. Egypt had been an incredible adventure, but the world was vast, and Ibn Battuta was determined to see it all. The journey continued, and so did the dream. Chapter 4: The Mysteries of the Red Sea. After many months exploring the wonders of Egypt, Ibn Battuta felt a new calling in his heart. He had seen the pyramids, walked along the Nile, and learned from the scholars of Cairo. But he knew there was still much more of the world to discover. His next destination? The Arabian Peninsula, a land of ancient cities, vast deserts, and deep spiritual meaning. To reach Arabia, Ibn Battuta had to cross the Red Sea, a body of water that was both mysterious and dangerous. He had heard stories about the Red Sea, about how its waters could turn from calm to wild in an instant, how its depths were home to strange and powerful creatures. But Ibn Battuta was not afraid. His desire to see new lands was stronger than any fear. He found a small boat that would take him across the sea. The boat was old and worn, its wooden planks creaking underfoot. But the captain assured Ibn Battuta that it was seaworthy. With a prayer on his lips and hope in his heart, Ibn Battuta stepped onto the boat. As the sails were raised and the boat began to move away from the shore, he watched Egypt fade into the distance. The land that had given him so much was now behind him, and a new adventure awaited. The journey across the Red Sea was difficult from the start. The sea was rough, the waves high and powerful. The wind whipped through the sails, pushing the boat this way and that. The sky was overcast, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. It felt as if the sea itself was testing him, challenging his determination. As the boat rocked back and forth, Ibn Battuta held tightly to the side, his knuckles white with the effort. The wind howled in his ears, and the cold spray of the sea stung his face. He prayed silently, asking for safe passage. The sea was wild and untamed, and there were moments when he wondered if the boat would survive the journey. Hours passed, but the storm did not let up. The waves grew even higher, crashing against the sides of the boat with a force that made the wooden planks groan. The boat tilted dangerously, and Ibn Battuta's heart raced with fear. He had faced many challenges on his journey so far, but this was something different. The sea was a force of nature, powerful and unforgiving. The crew worked tirelessly, adjusting the sails, bailing out water, and steering the boat through the storm. Ibn Battuta watched them, amazed by their skill and bravery. They were used to the sea, but even they looked worried. The Red Sea was living up to its fearsome reputation. Just when it seemed the storm would never end, the wind began to slow, and the waves gradually became smaller. The sky, still dark, showed signs of clearing. The boat, battered but still afloat, continued on its journey. Ibn Battuta let out a deep breath of relief. He had made it through the worst of the storm. But he knew they were not safe yet. The Red Sea was still vast, and they had a long way to go. As the boat sailed on, the sea became calmer. The waves that had once threatened to capsize them were now gentle, and the wind was a soft breeze. Ibn Battuta looked out over the water, watching as the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow on the sea's surface. It was a sight of beauty and peace after the storm's fury. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ibn Battuta saw land in the distance. The Arabian Peninsula was coming into view. His heart swelled with joy and relief. The journey had been perilous, but they had made it. As the boat drew closer to the shore, Ibn Battuta thanked God for keeping them safe. He had survived the mysteries of the Red Sea, and now he was about to step onto new land, a land filled with its own mysteries and wonders. When the boat reached the shore, Ibn Battuta stepped onto the sandy beach. The land was strange and beautiful, different from anything he had seen before. The air was hot and dry, the sky a brilliant blue. In the distance, he could see the outlines of mountains and desert dunes. The Arabian Peninsula was a land of contrasts, a place where life thrived in the midst of harsh conditions. The people he met were different from those he had encountered in Egypt. They spoke different languages, wore different clothes, and followed different customs. But Ibn Battûta was not intimidated by these differences. He had learned that every place had its own way of life, its own traditions and beliefs, and he was eager to learn from them. He visited the bustling markets where traders from all over the region came to buy and sell goods. The markets were full of life, with the sounds of haggling merchants, the smells of spices and incense, and the bright colors of fabrics and jewelry. Ibn Battûta spoke with the traders, asking them about their lives and their journeys. He listened to their stories, learning about the history and culture of the Arabian Peninsula. One of the most remarkable places he visited was the city of Jeddah, the gateway to Mecca. Jeddah was a city of great importance, a place where pilgrims from all over the world gathered before making the final journey to Mecca. Ibn Battûta was fascinated by the diversity of the people he met in Jeddah, pilgrims from Africa, Persia, India, and beyond. It was a place where the world seemed to come together, united by faith. But it was not just the cities and the people that fascinated Ibn Battûta. The landscape itself was a wonder. He traveled through the desert, where the vast empty spaces seemed to stretch on forever. The desert was both beautiful and harsh, a place where life was difficult, but where people had learned to survive and even thrive. The mountains, too, were a sight to behold, rugged and majestic, rising up from the desert floor like ancient sentinels. Throughout his time in the Arabian Peninsula, Ibn Battûta embraced the differences he encountered. He learned new languages, tried new foods, and participated in local customs. He realized that even though the people of the Arabian Peninsula were different from those he had met before, they shared the same human experiences: joy, sorrow, love, and faith. As he continued his journey, Ibn Battûta knew that he had been changed by his experiences in the Arabian Peninsula. The rough crossing of the Red Sea, the beauty of the desert, the warmth of the people. All of these had left a deep impression on him. He had learned to see the world with new eyes, to appreciate the diversity of life, and to embrace the unknown. Chapter 5: The Splendor of India. After his adventures in the Arabian Peninsula, Ibn Battûta felt the call of the road once more. His heart yearned for new experiences, new places, and new stories to tell. This time, his journey would take him to a land of incredible richness and beauty. A land known as India. The journey to India was long and challenging. Ibn Battûta traveled by sea and by land, through deserts and mountains, across rivers and forests. The journey was tiring, but his excitement grew with each passing day. He'd heard so much about India, its wealth, its culture, and its great cities. Finally, after many months, he arrived, and what he saw took his breath away. India was unlike any place Ibn Battûta had ever seen. The land was lush and green, filled with vibrant colors that seemed to dance in the sunlight. The air was thick with the scent of flowers and spices, and the sounds of birds singing filled the air. Everywhere he looked, there was life. People busy in the fields, children playing in the streets, and merchants selling their goods in crowded markets. It was a feast for the senses. One of the first places Ibn Battuta visited in India was the great city of Delhi. Delhi was the capital of the Sultanate, and it was a city of incredible splendor. The streets were wide and filled with people from all walks of life. The buildings were grand, with tall minarets and domes that gleamed in the sunlight. The markets were full of exotic goods, silk, spices, jewels, and perfumes from all over the world. It was a city of wealth and power, a place where anything seemed possible. When Ibn Battuta arrived in Delhi, he was welcomed with great honor. News of his travels had reached the Sultan, who was eager to meet this famous traveler. The Sultan was a wise and powerful ruler, and he was impressed by Ibn Battuta's knowledge and experience. He invited Ibn Battuta to stay in Delhi and offered him a position as a judge in his court. Ibn Battuta was honored by the Sultan's offer. He had always been a scholar, and the chance to serve as a judge in such a grand court was a great privilege. He accepted the offer and began his new life in Delhi. For many years, Ibn Battuta served the Sultan, helping to settle disputes, give advice, and maintain justice in the land. Life in Delhi was fascinating. Ibn Battuta learned about the customs and traditions of India, which were different from anything he had known before. He admired the art, the architecture, and the music of the land. He tasted the rich, spicy foods and enjoyed the colorful festivals that filled the city with joy and celebration. India was a land of splendor and mystery, a place where beauty and history were intertwined. But even as he enjoyed his life in Delhi, Ibn Battuta felt a longing deep inside him. He missed the thrill of the road, the excitement of discovering new places, the joy of meeting new people. He had seen so much of the world, and yet there was still more to see. The world was vast, and his heart yearned to explore it all. The Sultan of Delhi was a kind and generous ruler, and he understood Ibn Battuta's desire to travel. When Ibn Battuta told him that he wished to continue his journey, the Sultan gave him his blessing. He even provided him with gifts and supplies for the road ahead. It was a bittersweet moment for Ibn Battuta. He had enjoyed his time in Delhi, but the call of the unknown was too strong to resist. As Ibn Battuta prepared to leave India, he reflected on all that he had experienced. India had taught him so much. It was a land of contrasts, of wealth and poverty, of beauty and danger, of joy and sorrow. He had seen the splendor of the Sultan's court, but he had also seen the struggles of the common people. He had learned about the wisdom of Indian scholars and the richness of Indian culture. But most of all, India had reminded him of the importance of the journey itself. It was not just about the places he visited or the people he met. It was about the lessons he learned along the way, the ways in which the world changed him, and how he grew as a person. With the Sultan's blessing and the gifts he had received, Ibn Battuta set out once more on his journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but that was what made it exciting. He did not know what he would find or where he would end up, but he was ready to embrace whatever came his way. As he traveled through the lush countryside of India, Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given the chance to see so much of the world, to learn from so many different cultures. Each new place he visited was like a new chapter in a book, full of adventure and discovery. And India had been one of the most beautiful and fascinating chapters of all. But the journey was far from over. There were still many lands to explore, many stories to hear, many mysteries to uncover. Ibn Battuta's heart was full of anticipation as he continued on his way, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. India had been magnificent, a land of splendor, rich in culture and history. But Ibn Battuta knew that the world was vast, and there was still so much more to see. The road stretched out before him, and he followed it with excitement and joy, knowing that each step would bring him closer to new wonders and new experiences. Chapter 6: The Challenges of China. After his remarkable journey through India, Ibn Battuta felt the pull of adventure once more. His travels had taken him to many incredible places, but there was one land that still called to him, a land of great mystery and wonder: China. He had heard tales of this distant country, of its vast empire, its ancient traditions, and its incredible inventions. The thought of seeing it with his own eyes filled him with excitement. But he also knew that the journey would not be easy. The road to China was long and full of challenges. Ibn Battuta traveled through high mountains where the air was thin and cold. Each step was a struggle, but he pushed forward, determined to reach his destination. The paths were narrow and steep, winding through rocky cliffs and deep valleys. He had to be careful with every step, knowing that one wrong move could send him tumbling down into the abyss. But his spirit remained strong. The thought of China, of the wonders that awaited him, kept him moving forward. As he crossed treacherous rivers, Ibn Battuta marveled at the power of nature. The rivers were wide and fast, their waters rushing with a force that could sweep away anything in their path. He traveled on small, shaky boats that bobbed and swayed on the churning waters. Each crossing was a test of nerves, but Ibn Battuta kept his focus, praying for safe passage. The journey was exhausting, but he knew that every challenge he faced would bring him closer to China. Finally, after many weeks of travel, Ibn Battuta reached the borders of China. The sight that greeted him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. The land was vast and green, with fields stretching as far as the eye could see. The mountains in the distance were tall and majestic, their peaks touching the sky. And then, there it was, the Great Wall of China. This massive structure snaked across the landscape, its stone walls rising high above the ground. It was a sight of incredible strength and determination, a symbol of the greatness of the Chinese civilization. Ibn Battuta stood in awe before the Great Wall, amazed by its size and grandeur. How had they built something so immense? He could hardly believe his eyes. But there was no time to stand still. He was eager to explore more of this fascinating land. He traveled to the bustling cities where life moved at a fast pace. The streets were filled with people, traders, farmers, artisans, and scholars, all going about their daily lives. The markets were busy and full of energy, with merchants selling silk, tea, porcelain, and other goods that China was famous for. But as exciting as China was, it was also a land of great differences. The culture was very different from what Ibn Battuta was used to. The people spoke a language he did not understand, and their customs were strange to him. He had to learn new ways of doing things, and it was not always easy. The food was different too, spicy, sweet, and sour, with flavors he had never tasted before. Some dishes he liked, others, not so much. But he was always willing to try new things, to learn and adapt. There were times when Ibn Battuta felt lonely. China was so far from home, and the people around him were so different. He missed the familiar sights and sounds of his own land. He missed speaking his own language, sharing stories with friends, and the comfort of knowing the customs and traditions. But he knew that this was all part of the journey. Every new experience, every challenge was making him stronger and wiser. He was learning to see the world through different eyes, to appreciate the diversity of human life. Despite the challenges, Ibn Battuta found much to admire in China. The people were kind and generous, welcoming him into their homes and sharing their lives with him. He was impressed by their knowledge and skills, by the way they cultivated the land, built their cities, and created beautiful works of art. He visited schools where scholars taught the wisdom of Confucius, and he marveled at the Chinese system of government, which was organized and efficient. China was a land of great order and discipline, and Ibn Battuta had much to learn from it. One of the most memorable experiences Ibn Battuta had in China was visiting the imperial court. The emperor was a powerful ruler, and his court was a place of great splendor. The palace was decorated with gold and jade, with beautiful paintings and sculptures adorning every room. The emperor's throne was a sight to behold, a symbol of his authority over this vast and mighty empire. Ibn Battuta was honored to be received at the court, and he was struck by the majesty and grandeur of it all. But even in the midst of such splendor, Ibn Battuta never forgot the importance of humility. He knew that true greatness did not come from wealth or power, but from wisdom, kindness, and a willingness to learn. And so, he continued to travel through China, meeting people from all walks of life, listening to their stories, and learning from their experiences. As his time in China drew to a close, Ibn Battuta reflected on all that he had seen and learned. China had been a land of great challenges, but it had also been a land of great rewards. He had faced difficult journeys, navigated strange customs, and overcome feelings of loneliness. But through it all, he had grown stronger, wiser, and more understanding of the world around him. Leaving China was bittersweet for Ibn Battuta. He had seen so much, experienced so much, and learned so much, but he knew that the journey must continue. There were still many lands to explore, many more adventures to be had. The world was vast, and his heart was full of curiosity and wonder. As he set out on the next leg of his journey, Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of gratitude. He was grateful for the challenges he had faced, for they had made him a better traveler, a better learner, and a better person. He was grateful for the people he had met, for they had shown him the beauty and diversity of human life. And he was grateful for the journey itself, for it had taught him that the world was full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. And so, with his heart full of excitement and his mind open to the wonders of the world, Ibn Battuta continued on his incredible journey, always forward, always toward the unknown. Before we dive into Chapter 7, we want to remind you that you're listening to WooEnglish, where we bring the English language to life through captivating stories. If you're enjoying this journey with Ibn Battuta, remember to like, comment, and stay tuned for more adventures. Now, let's continue with Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The Stormy Seas of the Maldives. After his incredible adventures in China, Ibn Battuta felt the call of the ocean. His journey had taken him across deserts, mountains, and rivers. But now it was time to explore the sea. He had heard of a group of islands far away in the Indian Ocean, known as the Maldives. These islands were said to be like paradise, beautiful, peaceful, and full of wonders. Intrigued and eager to see them for himself, Ibn Battuta set sail once again. The journey to the Maldives was long and challenging. The ocean was vast, with no land in sight for days at a time. The waves were high and the wind strong, pushing the boat this way and that. But Ibn Battuta was not afraid. The sea was a new adventure, and he was ready to face whatever it brought. When he finally reached the Maldives, Ibn Battuta was struck by their beauty. The islands were small, with white sandy beaches and clear blue waters. Palm trees swayed in the breeze, and the air was warm and filled with the scent of flowers. It was like a dream, a place where the troubles of the world seemed far away. The people of the Maldives welcomed him with open arms, curious about this traveler who had come from so far away. But as Ibn Battuta soon discovered, life in the Maldives was not as easy as it seemed. The islands were beautiful, yes, but they were also isolated. The ocean around them was both a protector and a danger. The weather was unpredictable, with sudden storms that could turn the calm seas into a raging tempest. One moment, the sky would be clear, and the next, dark clouds would roll in, and the wind would howl. The sea would rise, and the waves would crash against the shore, threatening to sweep everything away. One day, Ibn Battuta experienced one of these storms firsthand. He was on a small boat, traveling between islands, when the sky suddenly darkened. The wind picked up, and the boat began to rock violently. The crew tried to steer the boat to safety, but the waves were too strong. Water splashed over the sides, and Ibn Battuta held on tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. The storm raged on, and for a moment it seemed as if the sea would swallow them whole. But just as quickly as it had begun, the storm passed. The sky cleared, and the sea calmed once more. The boat, though battered, had survived. Ibn Battuta let out a sigh of relief, grateful to be alive. But he knew that life on the sea was always uncertain, always at the mercy of the elements. The Maldives, with all their beauty, were a place where nature's power was always present, always reminding him of the fragility of life. Yet, the challenges Ibn Battuta faced in the Maldives were not just from the sea. The islands were ruled by local leaders who often disagreed with each other. Political intrigue was common, and the island leaders were constantly at odds, each trying to gain more power and control. Ibn Battuta, as a respected traveler and scholar, found himself caught in the middle of these conflicts. The people of the Maldives looked to him for guidance, and he was asked to serve as a judge and advisor. But this was no easy task. The leaders were suspicious of each other, and their disagreements often led to tension and conflict. Ibn Battuta tried to bring peace to mediate between the different factions, but it was difficult. The islanders were proud and stubborn, and they did not always listen to reason. One of the most difficult moments came when a powerful leader on one of the islands decided to challenge Ibn Battuta's authority. He was angry that Ibn Battuta had sided with his rivals in a dispute and sought to undermine him. Rumors spread, and soon there was talk of betrayal and rebellion. Ibn Battuta found himself in a dangerous position, unsure of who he could trust. But even in the face of these challenges, Ibn Battuta remained calm. He had learned much during his travels, about people, about politics, and about the importance of staying true to one's principles. He continued to do his work, offering fair judgments and trying to bring peace to the islands. Slowly, over time, he gained the respect of the people, and the conflicts began to ease. Despite the storms, both in the sky and among the people, Ibn Battuta also found much to admire in the Maldives. The islands were rich in natural beauty, and the way of life was simple and peaceful. He learned about fishing and boat building, about the delicate balance between the land and the sea. The people were skilled sailors, and they taught him about the currents and tides, about how to read the stars and navigate the open ocean. It was a new kind of knowledge, different from what he had learned in the cities and deserts, but valuable all the same. As the months passed, Ibn Battuta grew to love the Maldives, despite their challenges. The islands had tested him, but they had also taught him much. He had faced the power of the sea and the complexities of human conflict, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more understanding of the world around him. But as much as he enjoyed his time in the Maldives, Ibn Battuta knew that he could not stay forever. The world was vast, and there were still many places to see, many more adventures to be had. The call of the road was strong, and he knew that it was time to move on. With a heavy heart, Ibn Battuta said goodbye to the islands and the people who had become his friends. He boarded a ship, setting sail for new lands, new experiences, and new challenges. As the Maldives disappeared into the distance, he felt a deep sense of gratitude for the time he had spent there. The islands had been a place of beauty and difficulty, of peace and conflict. They had tested him in ways he had never imagined, but they had also shown him the strength of the human spirit, the power of nature, and the importance of perseverance. The sea was calm as the ship sailed away, the horizon stretching out before him. Ibn Battuta stood on the deck, watching the waves, feeling the wind in his hair. The journey continued, and so did the adventure. Each new place he visited, each new challenge he faced, was a step on the path of discovery, a path that would lead him to even greater wonders, even deeper understanding, and even more incredible stories to tell. And so, with his heart full of memories and his mind full of dreams, Ibn Battuta sailed on, always seeking, always learning, always ready for whatever lay ahead. The stormy seas of the Maldives were behind him, but the journey was far from over. Chapter 8. The Wonders of Africa. After his time in the Maldives, Ibn Battuta felt the call of the African continent. He had heard many stories about the vast lands to the south, filled with great cities, powerful kings, and rich cultures. The idea of exploring this mysterious land excited him. And so, he set out once more on his journey, ready to discover the wonders of Africa. His first challenge was crossing the Sahara Desert, a vast, endless sea of sand. The journey through the Sahara was unlike anything Ibn Battuta had experienced before. The sun blazed hot during the day, making the sand almost too hot to touch. The heat was intense, draining his energy with every step. But the nights were cold, with temperatures that made him shiver despite the layers of clothing he wore. The desert was a place of extremes, where survival was a constant struggle. Water was scarce, and the days seemed to stretch on forever. But despite the harsh conditions, there was something beautiful about the desert. The silence, the endless horizon, the way the stars lit up the sky at night. It was a place of mystery and solitude. Ibn Battuta traveled with a caravan, learning from the experienced desert traders who knew how to navigate this challenging terrain. They taught him how to find water, how to protect himself from the sun, and how to keep going when the journey seemed impossible. After weeks of travel, the desert finally began to give way to greener lands. Ibn Battuta had reached West Africa, and the change in scenery was dramatic. The dry, barren desert was replaced by lush forests, flowing rivers, and bustling cities. It was like stepping into a new world, a world full of life, color, and excitement. One of the first great cities Ibn Battuta visited in Africa was Timbuktu. He had heard many stories about this city, about its wealth, its scholars, and its importance as a center of trade. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality. Timbuktu was a city of great beauty, with tall, elegant buildings made of mud and stone. The streets were alive with activity, with merchants selling goods from all over the world: gold, salt, ivory, and more. The markets were full of color and noise, with people from different cultures and backgrounds coming together to trade and share ideas. Ibn Battuta was amazed by the richness of African culture. He met scholars who were renowned for their knowledge of science, mathematics, and religion. They welcomed him warmly, eager to share their wisdom and learn from his experiences. He visited libraries filled with ancient manuscripts, and he listened to the teachings of great thinkers who had come from all over the Islamic world to study in Timbuktu. But it wasn't just the scholars who impressed him. Ibn Battuta was struck by the kings and rulers he met in Africa. These were powerful leaders who commanded great respect, not just for their wealth and power, but for their wisdom and sense of justice. He met with the king of Mali, a ruler whose empire was vast and prosperous. The king's court was a place of splendor, filled with gold, jewels, and fine fabrics. But what impressed Ibn Battuta the most was the king's generosity and kindness. He treated his people with fairness, and he welcomed travelers from distant lands with open arms. As Ibn Battuta traveled deeper into Africa, he continued to be amazed by the diversity of the land and its people. He visited the city of Gao, another great center of trade and culture. Here, too, he found a rich and vibrant society, with people who were proud of their traditions and eager to share them with him. The rivers in this region were mighty and full of life, their banks lined with villages and fields. The forests were dense and mysterious, home to animals Ibn Battuta had never seen before: elephants, lions, and giraffes. The wildlife of Africa fascinated Ibn Battuta. He saw herds of animals moving across the plains, birds of every color filling the skies, and fish swimming in the clear rivers. The land was teeming with life, and everywhere he looked there was something new to discover. The people of Africa had learned to live in harmony with the land, respecting the animals and the natural world around them. Ibn Battuta admired this connection to nature and the way it was woven into every aspect of life. But Africa was not just about the great cities and the rich landscapes. It was also a land of deep traditions and strong communities. Ibn Battuta was invited to participate in local ceremonies where he saw dances, music, and rituals that had been passed down through generations. He was struck by the sense of community and the way people came together to celebrate life's important moments, births, marriages, harvests, and more. These traditions were different from anything he had seen before, but they were full of meaning and beauty. As Ibn Battuta continued his journey through Africa, he felt a deep sense of awe and respect for the land and its people. Every day brought new surprises, new challenges, and new lessons. He learned about the power of nature, the strength of community, and the importance of knowledge and wisdom. Africa was a continent of great contrasts, of wealth and poverty, of joy and hardship, of tradition and change. But it was also a place of incredible richness, where life was lived fully and with great spirit. Despite the challenges he faced, the heat of the desert, the long journeys, the unfamiliar customs, Ibn Battuta knew that his time in Africa was one of the most rewarding parts of his journey. The people he met, the places he saw, the lessons he learned, all of these would stay with him forever, shaping his understanding of the world and his place in it. As his time in Africa came to an end, Ibn Battuta felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful for the experiences he had had, for the kindness of the people he had met, and for the beauty of the land he had explored. But he also knew that his journey was far from over. The world was vast, and there were still many more places to see, many more adventures to be had. With a heart full of memories and a mind eager for new discoveries, Ibn Battuta set out once more on the road. Africa had been a land of wonders, a place that had challenged him, inspired him, and changed him in ways he could never have imagined. But the journey continued. And so did the adventure. There was still so much more to see, and Ibn Battuta was ready to embrace whatever came next, always seeking, always learning, always moving forward. Chapter 9: The Journey to Andalusia. After many years exploring the wonders of Africa, Ibn Battuta felt a new pull, a call from the west. He had heard many stories about a place called Andalusia in Spain, a land of incredible beauty, rich culture, and deep history. The stories spoke of grand cities, majestic palaces, and lush gardens that seemed like paradise. Ibn Battuta's curiosity was piqued, and he knew he had to see it for himself. And so, he set out on a new journey, this time toward the land of Andalusia. The journey was long, but Ibn Battuta was used to traveling great distances. As he crossed the Mediterranean Sea, he thought about all the stories he had heard. About the city of Granada, the famous Alhambra Palace, and the blend of cultures that made Andalusia so unique. He couldn't wait to see it all with his own eyes. When Ibn Battuta finally arrived in Andalusia, he was not disappointed. The cities were grand, with magnificent buildings that seemed to reach up to the sky. The architecture was a mix of styles with intricate designs that reflected the many cultures that had influenced this land over the centuries. The streets were full of life, with people from different backgrounds and traditions living side by side. It was a place where the East met the West, where different cultures blended together to create something truly special. One of the first places Ibn Battuta visited was the city of Granada. Granada was a city of great beauty, set against the backdrop of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The air was fresh and cool, and the city's narrow streets were lined with whitewashed houses, their balconies overflowing with colorful flowers. But what truly took Ibn Battuta's breath away was the Alhambra. The Alhambra was a palace like no other. It was a place of splendor, with gardens that seemed to go on forever, fountains that sparkled in the sunlight, and rooms decorated with the finest tiles and carvings. The walls were covered in intricate patterns, and the ceilings were painted with bright, vivid colors. Everywhere Ibn Battuta looked, there was something beautiful to see. It was as if the palace had been built to capture the essence of paradise on earth. As he walked through the Alhambra's gardens, Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of peace. The sound of water flowing from the fountains, the scent of blooming flowers, and the sight of the sun setting over the mountains. It was all so serene, so perfect. He understood why the people of Andalusia were so proud of this place. It was a symbol of their culture, their history, and their connection to the land. But as beautiful as Andalusia was, it was also a place of tension. The region was full of conflict, as Christians and Muslims fought for control. The air was thick with uncertainty, and Ibn Battuta could feel the tension wherever he went. The people were on edge, uncertain about what the future would bring. The streets of Granada, though full of life, were also full of whispers. Whispers of war, of battles lost and won, of alliances made and broken. Ibn Battuta could see the signs of conflict all around him. There were soldiers in the streets, walls and fortresses being fortified, and people preparing for the possibility of war. It was a stark contrast to the beauty of the Alhambra, a reminder that even in the most beautiful places, there could be hardship and struggle. Despite the tension, Ibn Battuta admired the resilience of the people of Andalusia. They were strong, determined to protect their way of life, their culture, and their land. He met with scholars, poets, and thinkers who were deeply engaged in preserving the rich heritage of Andalusia. They spoke passionately about their history, their achievements, and their hopes for the future. Even in the face of conflict, they continued to create, to build, and to dream. As Ibn Battuta traveled through Andalusia, he visited other cities as well: Seville, Cordoba, and Malaga. Each city had its own charm, its own history, and its own beauty. In Seville, he marveled at the grandeur of the cathedral and the Giralda Tower. In Cordoba, he visited the Great Mosque, a masterpiece of Islamic architecture that had been converted into a cathedral. The blending of cultures was evident everywhere he went, and Ibn Battuta was fascinated by the way different traditions had come together to create something new and unique. But it wasn't just the architecture and the cities that impressed Ibn Battuta. He was also struck by the natural beauty of Andalusia. The land was fertile, with rolling hills, lush valleys, and rivers that flowed gently through the countryside. The climate was mild, and the fields were filled with olive trees, vineyards, and orchards. It was a land that seemed to be blessed by nature, a place where life could thrive. Ibn Battuta spent many months in Andalusia, exploring its cities, meeting its people, and learning about its culture. He was inspired by the creativity, the knowledge, and the spirit of the Andalusian people. But he also felt the weight of the conflict that hung over the region. The battles between Christians and Muslims were a reminder that peace was fragile, that the beauty of this land was something that needed to be protected and cherished. As his time in Andalusia came to an end, Ibn Battuta reflected on all that he had seen and experienced. Andalusia had been a land of contrasts, a place of incredible beauty and deep tension, of grand achievements and ongoing struggles. He had learned much from the people he had met, and he carried their stories with him as he prepared to continue his journey. Ibn Battuta knew that his travels had taken him to some of the most remarkable places in the world, and Andalusia was one of the most unforgettable. The blend of cultures, the richness of the land, and the resilience of the people had left a deep impression on him. But he also knew that the journey was far from over. There were still many more lands to explore, many more adventures to be had. With a heart full of gratitude and a mind eager for new experiences, Ibn Battuta set out once more, leaving behind the wonders of Andalusia, but taking with him the lessons he had learned. The world was vast, and there were still so many stories to discover, so many mysteries to unravel. Chapter 10. The Struggles of Homecoming. After nearly 30 years of wandering the world, Ibn Battuta decided it was time to return home. His heart was filled with memories of the countless places he had seen, the people he had met, and the adventures he had lived. But now, the thought of returning to his hometown of Tangier, where it all began, stirred emotions he hadn't felt in a long time. He wondered, would home still be the same? Would he? The journey back to Tangier was bittersweet. As his ship neared the Moroccan coast, he could see the familiar outlines of the land where he had grown up. The hills, the beaches, the white-walled city. It all seemed so close, yet so distant. He felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. What would he find when he stepped onto that shore? He had been away for so long, almost a lifetime. When Ibn Battuta finally set foot in Tangier, the first thing he noticed was how much the city had changed. The streets he had once known so well now felt unfamiliar. The market, once bustling with the voices of people he knew, was now filled with strangers. The houses, the shops, even the smell of the city, it was all different. Tangier had grown, it had changed, just as he had. As he walked through the streets, memories flooded back, memories of his childhood, of his family, of the days when he had dreamed of exploring the world. But those memories were now tinged with sadness. His parents, who'd been his anchors, were gone. They had passed away while he was far from home on one of his many journeys. The house where he had grown up was empty, quiet, no longer the warm, lively place it had once been. Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of loss. He had seen so much, learned so much, and grown in ways he never imagined. But returning home, he realized that he could never go back to the way things were. He had become a stranger in his own land, disconnected from the life he had once known. The city that had once been his whole world now felt small, almost suffocating. But even as he struggled with these feelings, Ibn Battuta knew that he had been shaped by the world in ways that made him stronger, wiser. He had seen the splendor of distant lands, experienced the richness of different cultures, and survived the many challenges that came his way. He was no longer the young man who had left Tangier all those years ago. He was now a traveler, a storyteller, a man who had lived a life few could imagine. Yet despite all this, the loneliness of homecoming weighed heavily on him. He missed the companionship of his travels, the sense of purpose that came with discovering new places. In Tangier, he felt lost. The adventures that had once fueled his spirit now seemed like distant dreams, and he struggled to find his place in this changed city. But Ibn Battuta was not one to give in to despair. He knew that his experiences had given him something valuable: stories. Stories of lands far and wide, of people with different customs and beliefs, of trials and triumphs. He began to share these stories with the people of Tangier, and slowly, the city started to feel a little more like home. People gathered around him, eager to hear about the wonders of the world beyond their shores. They listened with wide eyes as he described the Great Wall of China, the bustling markets of Delhi, the majestic Alhambra in Andalusia, and the rich cultures of Africa. As he shared his stories, Ibn Battuta realized that his journeys had not only changed him, they had also given him a gift: the gift of knowledge, of understanding, of seeing the world in all its complexity and beauty. And now, he had the chance to share that gift with others, to inspire them, to open their minds to the possibilities that lay beyond the horizon. But still, the adjustment was not easy. Ibn Battuta often found himself walking through the city at night, when the streets were quiet, lost in thought. He would stand by the shore, looking out at the sea, and think about all the places he had been, all the people he had met. He missed the thrill of the road, the excitement of the unknown. He missed the sense of being part of something bigger, something that stretched beyond the boundaries of any one place. In these moments, Ibn Battuta felt the true weight of his homecoming. It was not just the loss of his parents or the changes in the city that troubled him. It was the realization that he could never fully return to the life he had left behind. He had been shaped by the world in ways that made it impossible to fit back into the mold of his old life. He was a traveler now, a citizen of the world, and Tangier, while still his home, could never again be his whole world. But with time, Ibn Battuta found a new sense of purpose. He realized that his journey was not over. It had simply entered a new phase. He might not be traveling the world anymore, but he could still explore, still learn, still grow. He could do this through the stories he told, through the connections he made with the people around him, through the wisdom he shared with those eager to listen. Ibn Battuta began to document his travels, writing down the details of his adventures, the lessons he had learned, the people he had met. He poured his heart into these writings, hoping that they would inspire others to seek out the world, to embrace its wonders, and to never stop learning. His stories became a bridge, a way to connect the past with the present, the familiar with the unknown. As the years passed, Ibn Battuta found peace in this new chapter of his life. Tangier might have changed, but it was still his home. And though he could never return to the person he once was, he could use his experiences to enrich the lives of those around him. He had seen the world, and now he could bring the world to Tangier. And so, Ibn Battuta, the great traveler, settled into his life in Tangier, finding comfort in the knowledge that his journey had not been in vain. He had returned home, not as the person who had left, but as someone who had been transformed by the world. And though the struggles of homecoming had been many, he knew that they had also been a part of his incredible journey, a journey that would live on in the stories he told, in the lives he touched, and in the legacy he left behind. Chapter 11. sharing his stories. Back in Morocco, after all his years of travel, Ibn Battuta found himself with a new mission. He had journeyed across deserts, sailed over seas, climbed mountains, and walked through bustling cities. But now, he wanted to share those adventures with others. His heart was full of stories, stories of distant lands, of brave encounters, of breathtaking beauty and unexpected challenges, and he knew that these stories were too precious to keep to himself. But where to begin? Ibn Battuta had seen so much, experienced so much, that the thought of putting it all into words felt overwhelming. Then, one day, he met a scholar in Fez, a wise man who was known for his knowledge and love of learning. The scholar was fascinated by Ibn Battuta's tales and offered to help him write them down, to turn his memories into a book that could be shared with the world. Ibn Battuta was excited by the idea. He agreed at once, and they began to work together. Each day, they would sit in a quiet room, and Ibn Battuta would tell his stories. He spoke of the golden sands of the Sahara, the bustling markets of Cairo, the great pyramids, and the mighty Nile. He described the splendor of the Alhambra in Andalusia, the mysteries of the Red Sea, and the majestic beauty of the mountains in China. As he spoke, the scholar listened carefully, writing down every detail, every emotion. Sometimes, as he told his stories, Ibn Battuta felt as if he were traveling again. He could almost see the places he had visited, hear the sounds of the markets, smell the spices in the air. He relived the moments of danger, when his heart had raced with fear. He remembered the times of joy, when he had discovered something new and wondrous, and he felt again the deep sorrow he had experienced on his return to Tangier, when he realized how much had changed. But more than anything, Ibn Battuta realized that his journey had been about more than just the places he had visited. It had been a journey of learning about the world, about different cultures, and about himself. He had faced many challenges, but each one had taught him something valuable. He had met people from all walks of life, each with their own stories, their own wisdom to share. And through it all, he had grown into a man who understood that the world was vast, full of mysteries and beauty, and that there was always something new to learn. As Ibn Battuta and the scholar worked together, the book began to take shape. It was filled with stories of faraway lands, of kings and scholars, of deserts and rivers, of cities and forests. It spoke of the kindness of strangers, the strength of communities, and the power of knowledge. And as the book grew, so did Ibn Battuta's sense of accomplishment. He was not just telling his own story, he was sharing the stories of all the people he had met, all the places he had seen. News of the book spread quickly. People from all over Morocco and beyond came to hear Ibn Battuta's tales. They were fascinated by his adventures, inspired by his courage, and moved by his wisdom. His stories opened their eyes to the world beyond their own borders, making them dream of distant lands and great adventures. They imagined themselves walking through the markets of Cairo, standing before the Great Wall of China, or sailing on the Indian Ocean. Ibn Battuta's stories sparked a sense of wonder and curiosity in everyone who heard them. As Ibn Battuta shared his stories, he realized something important. His journey had not been just about the places he had visited. It had been about the lessons he had learned along the way. He had learned that the world was full of different cultures and ways of life, but that deep down, people were all connected by their hopes, their dreams, and their desire to learn. He had seen that the world was both beautiful and dangerous, full of joy and sorrow, and that it was the journey itself that made life so rich and meaningful. And so, as Ibn Battuta continued to tell his stories, he made sure to share the lessons he had learned. He spoke of the importance of curiosity, of always being willing to explore, to ask questions, to learn new things. He talked about the value of kindness, of treating others with respect and understanding, no matter where they came from or what they believed. He emphasized the power of knowledge, of seeking out wisdom wherever it could be found, and of using that knowledge to make the world a better place. The book that Ibn Battuta and the scholar created became famous, not just in Morocco, but across the world. It was translated into many languages, and people from distant lands read about his adventures, his discoveries, and his insights. His stories inspired explorers, scholars, and ordinary people to look beyond their own lives and to see the world as a place of endless possibilities. For Ibn Battuta, sharing his stories was a way of continuing his journey. Even though he was no longer traveling, he was still exploring. Through the memories of his adventures, through the conversations with those who listened, and through the wisdom he continued to seek. He knew that his journey had been extraordinary, but he also knew that the most important part of any journey was what you learned along the way. As he sat in his study, surrounded by the pages of his book, Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had seen the world, and now he was helping others to see it too. His stories would live on, inspiring generations to come, reminding them that the world was vast, beautiful, and full of wonder. And so, with a heart full of memories and a spirit still eager to learn, Ibn Battuta continued to share his stories, knowing that in doing so, he was keeping the adventure alive, not just for himself, but for everyone who heard his tales. The journey might have ended, but the story would go on forever. Chapter 12. The Legacy of a Traveler. In his final years, Ibn Battuta found himself back in Morocco, in the quiet city of Tangier, where his incredible journey had begun. He had seen more of the world than anyone could have imagined, more than anyone of his time. From the burning sands of the Sahara to the majestic mountains of China, from the bustling markets of Cairo to the serene gardens of Andalusia, Ibn Battuta had traveled over 75,000 miles. His feet had touched nearly every part of the known world. Now, as he sat in his home, reflecting on the life he had lived, Ibn Battuta felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His travels had not been just about covering distance. They had been a journey of the soul, a search for understanding, wisdom, and connection. Every place he had visited, every person he had met, had taught him something valuable. He had learned about the richness and diversity of human culture, the beauty of the earth, and the strength of the human spirit. Ibn Battuta often thought about the people he had met on his travels, the kings and scholars, the traders and sailors, the farmers and artisans. He remembered their kindness, their hospitality, and their willingness to share their lives with a stranger. He thought about the different customs and traditions he had witnessed, the different ways people lived and worshipped. And he marveled at how, despite these differences, there was a common thread that connected everyone, a desire for peace, a love for family, and a respect for the world around them. But his journey had also taught him about the hardships of life, the dangers of the road, the struggles of the poor, the conflicts between nations. He had seen the harshness of the desert, the fury of the sea, and the cruelty of war. Yet, even in these dark moments, Ibn Battûta had found resilience and hope. He had seen people rise above their circumstances, find joy in small things, and keep their faith alive even in the face of great challenges. As he sat by the window of his home, looking out at the city of Tangier, Ibn Battûta felt a sense of peace. He knew that his journey had come to an end, but the stories he had gathered along the way would continue to live on. They would travel far beyond the walls of his home, far beyond the borders of Morocco. His stories would inspire others to dream, to explore, and to see the world not just as a map of places, but as a tapestry of experiences, emotions, and connections. Ibn Battûta spent his days writing down his memories, filling page after page with the tales of his adventures. He knew that these stories were not just for him, they were for the generations to come. He wanted people to understand the world as he had seen it, in all its beauty and complexity. He wanted them to feel the excitement of discovery, the joy of meeting new people, and the wisdom that came from seeing the world through different eyes. He also wanted his stories to remind people of the importance of understanding and tolerance. The world was vast, and there were many different ways of living, but at the heart of it all, people were not so different from one another. They all sought happiness, peace, and connection. Ibn Battûta hoped that his stories would encourage others to be open-minded, to seek out new experiences, and to embrace the diversity of the world. As his writing spread, Ibn Battûta's fame grew. People from distant lands came to hear his tales, to learn from his experiences, and to be inspired by his wisdom. His stories became a bridge between cultures, connecting people from different parts of the world. They sparked curiosity, ignited a sense of adventure, and encouraged others to explore the world around them. Even as he grew older, Ibn Battûta never lost his sense of wonder. He continued to learn, to ask questions, and to seek out knowledge. He knew that the world was full of mysteries, and even though he had traveled so far, there was always more to discover. His mind remained sharp, his spirit eager, and his heart full of gratitude for the life he had lived. And so, Ibn Battûta's legacy was not just in the miles he had traveled or the places he had seen. It was in the stories he told, the lessons he shared, and the inspiration he gave to others. His journey had been one of discovery, of the world, of people, and of himself. It had been a journey of understanding and wisdom, of seeing the world not just with his eyes, but with his heart. As the years passed, Ibn Battûta's stories continued to travel the world, carried by those who read his writings and were moved by his experiences. His name became synonymous with adventure, exploration, and a deep love for the world. He had shown that the world was a place of endless possibilities, and that every journey was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect with others. In the end, Ibn Battûta knew that his greatest achievement was not the distances he had traveled, but the connections he had made along the way. He had seen the world in all its diversity and beauty, and he had shared that vision with others. His feet might have finally stopped moving, but his stories would continue to inspire generations to come, encouraging them to embark on their own journeys, to seek out the wonders of the world, and to understand the beauty of our shared humanity. And so the legacy of lived on, a legacy of exploration of Swiss Domingue, of sheep's abiding love for the world and all its people.